That's fantastic.
All right.
I don't know about you.
Really?
They tried to see me with me.
Oh, yeah.
He's with the same group of people.
Well, that's, that's what I was thinking. If you couldn't swim that.
But you know, I learned one thing, you can't drive in the Navy.
Well, no,
if you're a white hat.
they only
They taught us how to take our hats, to stay afloat.
And your,
And hands, hands too.
Pins.
travel.
Yeah. I had a drag mine that the water flotation device.
Hey, Marty.
I just
He's there.
never understand that.
All right, so YouTube is good. It's live streamed, and now I'm going to share the screen.
Well,
So
let's think
share
about
your
it.
sound.
You fall overboard and your hat stays like that.
I don't think so.
You should measure there, and then you should have full control over your PowerPoint. Do you want to full screen it?
Yes. I might ask you just to stay for a while. If you can.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Looks like you're cranking. Let me get you a slide. Okay. If it's actually.
Capture air. I can see it help me. Capture air. White hat doesn't work.
Oh, I knew it was gonna be. And
Officers were.
yeah, I figured.
You have to fire a weapon.
Oh.
I went through it.
Yeah, all back,
They had a guy with a left.
Well, we got a front side on.
nice.
You just had to sign.
All right.
The train.
All right. That's it. Make sure that's good where you're at. Should be able
And in order to qualify with a weapon, they put you on the detail and you had to be able to go.
Is it working for
Really?
See if they have your picture.
you? Click it. Click it.
Me?
The one on this. Okay. And then if you want to go back. Yeah.
It's amazing. Sure.
I want you to take a look at this and then imagine me.
You can't even see it.
Now you have a new name.
We can call them many names.
Do you want the video up on the side like that, or do you want it off so you can see more of the?
I'd rather be able to see the PowerPoint, but like I said,
I think I can minimize this. Yeah. So it'll just be like the active speaker will be in the corner like that. So whoever is talking. Okay. Perfect. And then if you want to get out of the PowerPoint and just like, you'll just have to escape. Okay. You'll probably just be staying in this.
I have one.
Yeah. Perfect. But I'm not leaving it. So you can call me. All right. Just go into the next building.
all right.
All right.
That whole thing. We're gonna be here. I wouldn't be able to shoot it for an hour if I could.
No, yeah.
Get me somewhere fast.
Don't think about it.
Where will happen? I don't know what happened to Cheryl.
You guys hear me?
Of course, I have hearing aids.
You guys hear me?
I didn't either.
Oh, yeah. Online. Oh, it was from Maryland. Right. Oh, you should. Speaking that we take her. There's more people.
Can you guys hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Lord be with you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
All right. We'll see. Always afraid when I have to mess with anything technological. And there's a lot of, or at least it looks like, can you guys hear me? Yes. All right.
But you should talk.
Whenever you're ready. Feels like I'm back in the day.
I like my first grade class. Waiting for me.
Mm-hmm.
She's sweet.
We ready? Welcome, I'm Marty. Let's get started. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we give you thanks once again that you've called us to this place at this time to be in your word. Give us your Holy Spirit for a spirit of understanding and interpretation. And we ask that with everything that we do over the next hour or so, would be to your glory. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. At long last, Job, the book of Job. What did you think since you all finished it, right?
Right. Right. Dream on.
What do you, how many of you have read the book of Job? And what is your,
A long time ago.
yeah, a long time ago.
Long
And
time.
what was your impression the last time that you read it?
Bad things happen to good people.
It's about when bad things happen to good people. What else?
I still think, what is the point of it all? Like, granted, he's better off in the end, but would he have traded all that pain to be better off? That's where how I.
Question, good question. What else?
It helped me find the answer in my own mind of why bad things happen to people.
Okay.
Because when I question why this Lord, I get the answer from there, which is were you there at the beginning of the creation?
Sure.
That's a beautiful, it kind of puts me in my place regarding.
What else?
Well, I think Job is a,
Hold on. We need to hold the mic so that people that are online can hear what we're.
oh, okay. Well, to me, the book of Job is just much more about the reality of living. You're not gonna get through this life without troubles, and you have to work with it, face them, and move on. Maybe that's a little bit, but that's.
Well, some people think that the book of Job is dismal. I think it's beautiful. And it gives me a lot of consolation. But I know that that's not the experience of everybody.
Justice.
Say it again?
I think it was a lot more about justice too, and trusting.
Say more about that. About justice. God's justice?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you cannot control things, that it's in his control.
Okay.
And trust. It's not trust.
You know, I taught this class here at Christ Church, I think maybe 6 years or 7 years ago. And I remember distinctly, and I can't remember who it was, maybe it's one of you here, I don't think so, but she hadn't read ahead, which is, that's fine. I would recommend, reading a few chapters ahead of time so that when we're together, we can talk about it. But I can tell you that this particular woman had not been reading ahead of time. And when we got to, I guess, the big scene, if that's the right way to describe it, she said, "Is that it?" And so she was unsatisfied by the ending.
I personally do not like Job. It's always made me very uncomfortable, especially at the beginning, where God allows Job to be tested over and over again to prove, and that makes me very uncomfortable. Yeah, felt that way.
Yeah, I agree. I saw a comment, this one frame comment. And there was a psychotherapist that looked like Freud, and then Job was on the couch. He said, "It just feels like God is out to get me."
Well, to finish my thought, I don't know if I made it clear, like, his life seemed pretty good to start with. So like, that was pretty satisfying.
Yep.
And so I don't think the point was to get more stuff, is it that he was supposed to learn to trust God, which it seems like he did. So I feel like I'm missing some sort of point in the story.
Yeah.
Because to me, I'm missing something.
That's why we're we're gonna read this together.
Mine is just a question. Is Job a study in faith? And is that the overarching idea by learning or understanding Job? That it's his faith that carries him through?
I think that that's probably one of the central themes. How do we respond when bad things happen to us? And I think we've all had that experience. But I wouldn't say that our faith is the only thing that we could learn by reading this book.
I have a question about, today we have prosperity gospel.
Yep.
And in the time of Deuteronomy, we had a Deuteronomistic idea, if you do what God asks, everything comes up, just throws this for you. We all know the reality of that either the prosperity gospel or the Old Testament view. So is this book kind of a reality tale with that backdrop? Like, yes, God wants you to do good things and you will be blessed, but no, there is this problem of suffering.
Well, this book, Job, is a part of in what we call the Old Testament or the Hebrew scriptures. And there are three books that are included in the so-called writings. Right? And here I'm just talking about how Jewish people understand the Bible, what we call the Old Testament and sometimes called the Hebrew scriptures. We have it's called the Tanakh. Anybody heard that word before? Tanakh. Yeah. Stands for the Torah and the prophets, and then the writings. And we're, the book of Job is in that category. And those three books don't speak with the same voice about things that you were asking for, right? Proverbs is part of the writings. And Proverbs basically says, if you just do the right things that God likes, then you'll be blessed, right? And on the other side, the book of Job has sort of opposite outlook, right? Like you can do everything good and still bad things can happen to you. And then Ecclesiastes is sort of in between. And I love that those three things are put together. We call them wisdom literature. And the reason why I like those three books together is because I'm comfortable with not knowing the answer. Right? We talked a little bit about that last week. That at least in our Christian tradition of the Anglican Church, we are typically more comfortable with just living the questions and not. We have lots of questions, but sometimes we don't have any. Sometimes we don't have the answers to those questions. If that makes sense. And I love that the ambiguity and the tension between a book like Proverbs that basically says if you do X, then Y happens, and Job basically says the opposite, not the opposite, but it's more nuanced, let's say, right? Somebody has.
Yeah, I think it's not about stuff. You know, to me, it's the ultimate. That we're asked to have faith in God and Jesus Christ in this life, or the reward in the next life. So that's maybe why it's unsatisfying, is because at the end, he just had just what he had in the beginning, sort of. Instead of what you would like to have seen was that he went to heaven. You know, that because he never lost faith, despite all that happened to him, he did get his ultimate reward. So I think we're kind of missing his point. To me, that's the story of Christianity, and why it's so damn hard. You know, is you got to work, you got to believe and have faith, and it's not what happens now.
Yeah.
It's what happens later.
I would say yes, but you know, it really, I think that it means a lot to God that we don't exist waiting for the next life. We are called to do justice now, right? And to love and to do all of the things that Jesus has called us to do. And not just sort of, yeah, exactly. And we're not trying to, at least in our part of Christianity, of our Christian family tree, our part of that tree, we are not, we don't understand that the things that we do, we're not trying to work our way into heaven, in other words, right? We try to live an upright and a life of love, but thank God, Jesus, and thank God for grace, right? It doesn't, it matters what we do in our lives, but we're not going to get it right. And thank God for grace, right? So, but we have work to do in this life.
I have a question. I'm wondering if Job, in the book of Job, Job starts out as, extraordinarily successful for his time.
Yes.
Now, I don't know, it's in when people are very successful, the lack of humility seems to come through, where they believe it's their hard work and their whatever. None of their success was based on a gift from God. So what I see with Job is he was basically given everything, and then it was taken away. And so it's a story of how you're going to deal with your life in that cycle of being given and then losing.
That's a part of it, I think. I mean, there's not a sense that Job has done something wrong. In fact, just the opposite.
Right, exactly.
But
maybe he never did anything right to get what he got, in a way.
yeah, the text doesn't comment on that. It just says what it says, which is that he was basically blameless, and he's lived his whole life. This is hard for a Christian to say, but and keep in mind, this is a piece of Jewish literature, right? And we always have to remember, even though we're Christians, that the context is a Jewish context. And so the reason why I said it is because we all know, or we all believe that we are sinful, not sinless. But the way that this story, and it's really important to emphasize that this is a story, that this story happens outside of history, right? So Job, as the story is told, is basically sinless. And it starts right at the beginning. It says, there once was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, one who feared God and turned away from evil. So that's the sort of setup. And you're right.
I have a question for you, I guess.
Yeah, sure.
Two things. One, what you said about the Bible. Here in the Bible says this, here in the Bible says that, in the Bible says this.
Yeah.
And they kind of go the opposite of each other.
Yeah.
So does that make sense to a person? How do you reconcile that with you?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, what part of Job's story comforts you? Where I'm just curious what you take away from it.
Yeah, sure.
I want your interpretation.
The reason why it gives me consolation the book, that is because it doesn't, at the end, it doesn't purport to have easy answers to life's hardest questions, right? The first time I read the book of Job was right after I had read a tiny book called When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And well, I wanted to see what he had to say. That's Rabbi Kushner. And I read and read and read and read, and I was waiting for the answer, right? Why do bad things happen to good people? And there's no answer. And for me, that's comforting, because the Bible is not a treasure right? Doesn't have, it's not an instruction manual. And for me, I find that comforting. Basically, we're finish the book before we get started. But for me, the answer is that, not the answer, but why it's comforting for me is that it basically says, we don't know everything. Why do bad things happen to good people? We don't know. They just do. And God knows, but we are not privy to everything that God knows. And basically, that's, especially when we get to those chapters in where God speaks out of the world, right? Oops, sorry.
I liked your comment about justice. And in our construct of monotheistic God, we give him attributes, love, goodness, and justice.
Yes.
And I think the whole problem of Job, but the entire Old Covenant, is that it doesn't really answer theologically why we suffer.
Yeah.
And I would say until very modern times, for the humanity in general, life was hard. This business of comfortable life, I think, is a very modern evolution.
And
Life is
it's
hard.
only just for certain
And
populations. Even
well,
today.
I would say 100 years ago, unless you were very rich, tiny percentage of the time, life was hard.
All I'm saying is that it still is for many, many, many people.
Precisely. Is God just? And this theologic dilemma, I think you can comment on it. In our Christian belief, we've created a escape hatch. The next life is going to make up for all this suffering in this life.
Yeah.
Done.
Say more about that. No. Yes, I suppose. We have a state escape hatch.
Like on the submarine.
Sure.
Or submarine.
Yes. Yeah, but there is one, but I wouldn't recommend you go into it because it's really a bad idea. Anyways, yeah, this book tries to hold that tension between God's justice and God's mercy, I think, and that's for each of us to decide if the book did a good job.
I'm with that agreement with you. It's the first book kind of in crisis that I really went into with the Bible, and I found it incredibly comforting. And I think it's because of when I was searching for answers, like how can he turn to his friends, or to, you could in life turn to science or your friends or the experts or whatever. And when the end came, I actually found that it's beyond comforting, because it's kind of like you can look forever, but it's still going to be a mystery. And to learn how to get comfortable in that space, it kind of gave me permission to be like, to let go kind of in a big way and move into a bigger space of it's not going to be answered, but so you can rest in that in a way, as opposed to turning to all the things that we have to offer in the world to find answers. So that's.
All right. Let's continue. Let's see what my notes say. Yeah. I lost my PowerPoint.
That was me.
Well, there are probably people trying to get in.
Oh, no.
There it is. Okay. All right.
Do you want me to share this from the Zoom?
Yes, please.
Come on now. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. So see if I can. It is one of the masterpieces of world literature, and that's even not considering the spiritual aspect. I mean, you can't really consider it without the spiritual, but I guess what I'm saying is that people that are not believers, see value in the book of Job as literature even, okay? And I think we've basically covered that. And it's just, these are just questions, right? The problem of divine justice, the problem of evil, why do the righteous suffer? Why do bad things happen with people? Usually when we start a new book of the Bible, we are concerned with things like author and time of writing, etc. And really, we don't have a lot of good information, right? The author is not clear. The setting, the land of Uz or Uz, it's we don't know where that is, right? Some people think that it's in Edom, ancient Edom, which is modern day Jordan, or part of it. Other scholars think that the land of Uz is in somewhere in the Arabian Peninsula. And we don't know, but more importantly, it's not material to the story, right? This is a story. So this is, as I've said, not a historical story. So there's no clear historical setting. We just know the story. And you know, like Remington used to like to say, don't concern yourselves with questions outside of the text, right? The text should rule the study, right? Questions. How do you feel about the fact that this is, at least as I'm teaching it, Job was not a historical person and not from a historical land and people. There are no, Job is not an Israelite. There's no other characters, I'm pretty sure, who are Israelites. It's interesting, at least to me, that this story, which was written in Hebrew for the Hebrew people, doesn't concern itself with those kinds of geographical questions. Touch.
Geography, maybe Uz is next door to Oz.
All right, I'll take it. Louise.
Also, when we were studying with Remington, there were times when he said a lot of scripture was either written down or designed to be done dramatically.
Yeah.
This really seems to lend itself to that.
Mhm.
So not focusing so much on this happened as it happened, who is it? But this is a play for us to wrestle with those questions.
Yeah. This book is, and we'll talk about the structure in a second. It starts in prose for the first 2 or so chapters. And so the prologue is the first 2 chapters, and it's in prose. And then at the end, there's a prose epilogue. Those are the sort of really small parts of the whole book. The sort of big middle is poetry, right? And if you like poetry, good read. I like poetry, but I don't understand it oftentimes. But and then when you lay on these layers, it was written in it was Hebrew poetry. It also adds to the complexity, but I think also the beauty. Questions, comments? Okay. There. The clear literary design. Chapters 1 and 2, short narrative prologue, then great big, the big middle. Chapters 3 to 37, it's dense Hebrew poetry representing conversations between Job and 4 so-called dialogue partners, the friends. And then in chapter 38, God gets to make his debut, or his big speeches. And then chapter 42 is, we go back to narrative, the epilogue. Questions? I don't know if you can see that or not, but the prose narratives, I can't see my own page. Well, you can read it. Okay. Those are the dates. So it's, I guess, important to know that the book of Job was written by somebody, and then at some later time, it was expanded upon. Questions about that? I think that, there was a short story about why bad things happen to good people. And then one of the creative types decided that they had to have more meat, so to speak. And that's what scholars think. Okay. All right, and we start then as we did. There was a man in the name of, sorry. There once was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And that man was blameless and upright. And he turned away from evil. So that's the setup. There were born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters, and a whole bunch of stuff, sheep and camels and cows, and lots of servants. And so this man, Job, was the greatest of all the people of the East. And his kids, they're mostly grown, young adults, and they, not bad people, but they like to party. Nothing wrong with that. And importantly, at least for me, Job made lots of sacrifices. I mean, literal sacrifices. He killed a whole bunch of animals so that he was trying to protect his kids. He's going above and beyond to make sure that if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then Job will make extra sacrifices so that and that's what they're saying is that that's how good he was, right? And that's how much he loved God and loved his kids. Go ahead. What?
My mother said Joe was a codependent.
Yeah. Let's say that. Okay, so this is the sort of setup, and then things get heated up, so to speak. One day, the heavenly beings came to present themselves before the Lord, and this says Satan, that's supposed to say the Satan, also came among them. And so we get this idea that up in heaven, in the heavenly realms, God is there, and there are angels or supernatural beings, and that those supernatural beings sort of come and go, and they check in with God from time to time. And that it's problematic to me that my translation just says it's Satan and not Satan, because this is the word in Hebrew is not a name, it is a title. It is an accuser, a prosecuting attorney. Right? And we don't have any background about that, the heavenly realm and when I read this, I have lots of other questions, like why this, why that, and we just don't know. So Job is being set up, and the Satan, the prosecutor. Well, first of all, God is bragging on Job, right? Look at my servant Job. He's so good. And I wish, I'm obviously embellishing, but I wish that all of my people would be as good as Job because he's the gold standard. And the Satan said, have you considered my servant Job? Well, actually, we're still with God. Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. Then the Satan answered the Lord, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a fence around him and around his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, right? Somebody was talking about that earlier. And his possessions have increased in the land. Right? But if you just stretch out your hand now and touch all that he has, he will curse you to your face. You're basically saying what? Why is Job so good?
I was wondering, why is God trying to prove anything to Satan? And why are they even talking?
It's a great question. It doesn't address that. That's not the point of the story. Like I was saying, when I read Job, I get all kinds of questions, but some of those questions are not addressed. And if you can let go of this idea that this is something that actually happened, instead of a story about why bad things happen to people, then we can let go of, well, why would God do that? And the answer is God didn't. This is a story about God and what somebody thought about, trying to make sense of why bad things happen to people. So God wouldn't do that, right? So God didn't do that. This is not something, it's not a chapter in history of God's interaction with humans. It's a story trying to teach us something about ourselves.
So that makes sense. So I was wondering, how do we know it's not a historical story? Because maybe I missed something here at the beginning or after. How do we know it's not historical?
No. Well, the most honest answer is that we don't know for sure. But the testimony of the scholars, Hebrew scholars, and Christian scholars, would agree that there's nothing in the story that points towards this story being anything but a story. Right? And furthermore, I mean, is that what actually historical? I don't know that I could worship that God. I don't know. A God that would kill people, innocent people, for sport, basically, to win a bet with Satan. That's not a God worthy of our worship. So I really hope that it's not history, because otherwise, what do we say about God's justice? it's really challenging, at least for me. Really is.
Is, if the way I understand Satan right now is that he's not the Satan that we think of as the devil, that he is, they refer to him as sons of God came to present themselves
Yeah.
before the Lord. And in a sense, I'm thinking of him or them that appeared as angels or something, and God's having this conversation with an angel named Satan, but he's not representing evil at this point.
Right.
Right. My understanding.
Yeah, and again, the word Satan is not a name, it's not a name, it's a job title. Right? And it takes a long time, centuries, for our understanding of Satan or the devil. It's always that idea of evil personified is always moving, it's changing from ancient Hebrew concepts of God and angels, the idea of a fallen angel, those things happen over time. Our understanding of them changes over time. And then once you, after the Christ event, and then when the birth of the Christian church happened, and then the church grew, became the predominant religion in the Mediterranean basin. It then take all of the history from prehistory, Hebrew stuff, and then mix in Christian stuff. Then add in things like Dante's Inferno, and it takes a long time, but we can trace, if we did a class on evil or on Satan, we could do that if you want. Macabre, but good. But you can see where the Satan of Job over 3,000 or 4,000 years turns into a red little devil with a and those things, you have to have a lot of, takes a lot of steps to get from that to what we typically understand about Satan. Right? Yeah. I mean,
Satan is a questioner here, but he's really making, I'm putting it in simplistic terms, a theological statement. Job is good because it pays well.
Yeah. That's the Satan's case, right? That's what he's saying. What do you think about it is the question, right?
I think Hutch should write a wonderful short Bible for us. That was great. The other thing that helps me understand that many of these things are not real historical stories is that if you think about what the mindset and the understanding of science or medicine or meteorology or why earthquakes happen, why do people get sick, the only reference they ever had was that God was involved. God was the author of many things that we know now are not God's doing. So when we read something about this old and we think, how could God talk to Satan that way, or how could God do this? It's all in the idea that the early Israelites believed that God was so involved in their lives that all of these things they didn't understand had something to do with God.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah. You know, just to go back for a second, if you just consider the Old Testament or the Hebrew Scriptures, there are, what, 66 books? I have to subtract. That math. My point is that the Bible, if you just take even the Old Testament, it covers many different genres of writing. And the reason why I said a few minutes ago that, you know, scholars don't believe, most scholars don't believe that this is history, is because this is a piece of Hebrew writing. And the Jews today and throughout written history of the Jewish people didn't understand Job, the story of Job, to be history, right? You have to fast forward all the way up to the 18th and 19th century in our country, when Christians and the idea of Christian fundamentalism sort of, which is a Christian heresy, that's relatively new in history, that told people that the only way to understand books that are obviously not history must be history. That's a heresy. It's just not the case. And if you go and just sit down with a rabbi and ask him or her about the book of Job, if you ask him or her if the book of Job is history, I would say 99% or more would say it's not. We have, and if I'm forced to understand those kinds of writings to be history, we're not doing it right. So, any questions about that, please?
And when I say the part about the history, I don't think like this conversation, obviously, but like that there wasn't anything of in this land and this happened.
Right.
You're saying no, that's not.
What I'm saying is that I don't believe that it is, but I don't know for sure. Remember this principle in our Bible studies anyways, as I think I talked about it at least once or twice when I was covering for our team. I lost my train of thought. Certainly. Yeah, and that, you all are, by virtue of the fact that you're here, you're all what I call, you're all Anglican theologians, right? That's our context. And anybody who thinks about God and then talks to somebody else about it or writes it down, that means you are a theologian. Right? And any good Anglican theologian starts with this point. Starts with humility. I could be wrong, but I believe that's why. And that's a different posture of understanding the Bible, right? All over, especially in our country. Everybody's got the answer. And they're really, really excited to share it with the, I've got the right answer. And if you want to know it, let me know.
feel like in a way that's the message of the whole book of Job. Because it's less for me about Job's faith and being tested and more about a revelation of who God is, right? So it's the point of the book, maybe for me, is trying to uncover more about who God is and how we react to God, right? So the initial premise is he loves God, but he doesn't know how awful God can be, right? And so then realizing how awful and awesome, right, all powerful, so all completely at the mercy of God, and sure that, you know, I don't get to the end, but then, you know, he talks about, I talked about things I didn't know, and now I despise myself, and I said, I am.
Yeah.
So, and God is saying throughout the book, where were you when I did this? And you don't have control of all of it. So, you know, we could take away a message that God is wrathful and horrible to us and put master, having us suffer for the sake of that, right?
Yes.
Or we could just say that in the end, every circumstance of our life is out of our control. And will we remain faithful? Yes.
And our starting point is humility. That God is God and we are not. Therefore, we don't know it. Well, that was a good stop. That's a good start. Your girlfriend's home. Thank you all. We will, if you haven't read the first 2 chapters, and that's, I mean, it's really short. Please read chapter 1 and chapter 2. And if you're so inclined, we can start with the poetry next week as well. We'll finish the prologue and start with the poetry and see how far it goes. Okay? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you tonight.